Is it possible for you and I to disagree with each other without invalidating one another? We're living in a climate where disagreements have become personalized to the point of hating the other. If you're not with me, you're against me. Why should it be that way? Why can't we have a civil disagreement, even a fundamental one, and still love each other? This is the topic we will be addressing. How to disagree without hate. What are the roots and the causes for that hatred? And what can we do about it in this polarized environment? Hi everyone, this is Simon Jacobson, weekly Wednesday night global masterclass. How to disagree without hate. We're living in a very polarized time. One would think that it would be quite logical that people disagree because we have different opinions about matters. The Talmud puts it this way: people's minds think differently, just like our faces are different, our opinions, our viewpoints, our perspectives may be different. It could be very drastically different. But it's now spilled over into becoming personal, literally to the point that you can be hated for your opinion if it's not like someone else's opinion. And I'm talking on both sides of the aisle, on all aisles and no aisles. This is not a political discussion. This is about human beings, the human condition. Why is it that we can't just disagree civilly and then sit down for dinner? Okay, today that may be limited, but you get the idea. That we can be friends and even love each other and have a fundamental disagreement about whatever matter it may be: politics, policy, philosophy, theology, psychology. Sometimes we have to step back and ask ourselves, why is it that way? Why does it have to spill over? Why does it have to become to the point where people say, if you don't agree with me, if you're not for me, you're against me. For me to be right, you have to be wrong. First of all, none of us are perfect. None of us are God. No one has a monopoly on truth. So perhaps you have a perspective, the other person has a perspective. And as a matter of fact, you both can grow. All of us can grow if we hear each other out and come away with a third approach or a better approach that's more crystallized, more refined, because we've seen and stretched the idea. Isn't that the rational, logical way the mind works? As soon as it becomes emotional and subjective and even impulsive, how do we even know we're thinking objectively? Maybe we've been brainwashed. Maybe we just have locked into a position without really exploring. Isn't that what free inquiry is all about? The ability to challenge ourselves and others, all in a pleasant, civil, and beautiful way. So this is what we're going to be addressing. It's actually very disturbing, I'm sure, to all of us. Because even people who don't tolerate another person's opinion, they don't think they're not tolerating. They just think the other person is so wrong. How could you even think that way? To the point that they completely dismiss and invalidate that person. That's the problem. No one's going around saying, you know what, I'm an invalidator. I don't respect anybody. They're saying, no, I am on the side of truth and right. You're wrong, and you have to be humbled. You have to be humiliated. Why? Why does it have to spill over to that extent? Is it truly based on someone's conviction that they're so convinced? Let's take a case like Hitler. So all of us could agree what he did, what he initiated with the Nazi movement, the amount of deaths of innocent people. And I'm not just speaking as a Jew. That's particularly painful to 6 million Jews. But what he brought to the world in his distorted and obscene philosophies and led a whole country, whether they did it actively or they acquiesced or they just allowed it to happen, not getting now into collective responsibility. That's been debated, but regardless. So we could all agree this is a person who was the personification of evil. Even though there were many good people, seemingly, that went along with him. Well, then we wonder, how good were they? Or was it a selective good? They chose what's good. And those that they felt were not worth it could be exterminated, like you would exterminate rodents. It's exactly what they used that example. But I would say, obviously, philosophically, you could start arguing the point that we can all agree that this person's opinion should not even be tolerated. And that spills over to not only did we disagree with that ideology, but we adamantly reject it and invalidate it. So there you can make the argument, okay, it's a pretty clear person who killed 6 million innocent men, women, and children just because they were Jewish, and gypsies, and other what they called unwanted elements of society, and without any due process, without anything, that you can agree with is the person, by their actions and their choices, have identified themselves as something you have to utterly reject. And you don't go about saying, okay, let's hear your opinion, I'll hear my opinion. But is that a justification for every disagreement? Can we now say, every time I disagree with you, it goes to that extent? I consider you as evil, an evil act? I would say most of us would not say that. Even those that hate Trump, and they have compared him to Hitler actually, I think if push comes to shove, you sit them down, they're not going to say. They were speaking metaphorically. Even though, frankly, I think some people it's more than metaphorical. I don't even know why they would do that. And this is not a pro-Trump discussion, but just by saying what I just said, I intentionally did it. I know many people who are Trump haters will say, this is a lover of Trump. We have to invalidate him. I've gotten hate mail over the years, not just about Trump, about others. If you're not adamantly against someone, it means you're for him. First of all, how's that conclusion exactly come to anywhere? There are many people who are either neutral or don't have adamant positions. They may have opinions, and maybe their opinions are not so emotional and not so charged. So where's the root of this? Because if we want to uproot something, you have to understand where it's coming from. Just to say my opinion is very strong and I'm very passionate, and maybe it spills over. I've heard this from people. Intelligent people who I know, who I disagree with, they disagree with me about different matters. And they say, you're right, Rabbi, that perhaps my passion has gotten the better of me. But you have to remember it's coming from a good place. I have no problem with someone saying that. At least they acknowledge that. And maybe I can also be guilty of that. Sometimes your passions become very strong. And yes, you could say something that could be offensive or even invalidating another person's position. But at least you can acknowledge it, step back, apologize, and correct. And let's create that civil discussion. But those that can't say that, which is many, many people, you start wondering what's going on here. What is it about the human psyche that we can stoop to that level? Again, I'm not naming anyone. I'm not speaking which opinion, which not opinion. There's no hidden agenda here. It's really an understanding of this type of thinking. And is it even thinking? Okay, so let's go through the usual suspects. Some people say that in essence, most people would have no problem disagreeing with each other, even if and even if strong disagreement, and yet not personalize it. But we're living in an environment of entertainment. It's called the media. And the media fans flames because it wants viewers. It's like a wrestling match. You want the viewers, so you have to feed each side. You have to make sure two sides are really clashing. And they're invested that it become personal. I mean, the baseball season is now compromised or whatever is happening with it. But who remembers Boston Red Sox and New York Yankee fans? They literally, they despised each other, many of them. It's a game. Who really cares? It doesn't even make a difference, not even on the ideology. But people tend to like teams, cowboys and Indians. the good guys and the bad guys. And we've glorified it in a way. So if it's on television, it's imaginary, it's a baseball game, you could say it's innocuous, who really cares? But it's still not so simple, because I do know people who actually personalize. And they can't even laugh at themselves. They can't even step back and say, hey, this is just a show. So you like this character or that character. But that itself tells us something. Why are we so susceptible, and so impressionable by people being pitted against each other and positions being pitted? Is it because we're superficial? And when someone positions a story a certain way, and say, here are the good guys, here are the bad guys, it's just the easiest narrative that we can embrace? Is it due to our own shallowness? Okay, we'll explore that as well. That's one approach. Another approach can be taken, a more psychological one, is that most people really don't have positions. If one really had a position and it was thought through, soberly deliberated upon, then of course you want to clarify and make sure that position is very powerful. We don't have really positions, so therefore we assume a position. It's a little extension of point number one, but I'm taking it more on a human level. And being that we haven't really thought it through, we just, hey, I like this one, I like that one. It could be due to factors that we grew up in our homes, the society in which we live, what's popular. Basically, that human beings are essentially conformists, most. And as a conformist by definition is going to conform to a particular viewpoint and doesn't think about it. It's thoughtless, frankly. I know this may sound insulting to some people. How could you say that about me, my position? I don't mean to personalize it. I still love you. I love everybody. I'm just trying to analyze, why would somebody have come to a point where they can't just disagree intelligently? Because maybe it's not based on intelligence. Maybe it's based on some visceral, emotional, brainwashing, even programming. We talk about the Germans, the Nazis. Many of them were brainwashed. They're still responsible as adults. But people, when you feed them something again and again, and they're not free thinkers and free thinkers and critical thinking people, this becomes my position. And the other position is not even possible. So let's explore this one. This goes a lot further than point number one. This isn't just the media is hyping it all up and we're buying into it. That there's something about human beings that like to identify with a group. And this is true, unfortunately, in all levels, even in religious communities. You can be convinced that you have the absolute truth and everyone else is inferior. There is that attitude. It's condescending, it's judgmental, and it's not healthy, frankly. But it exists, unfortunately. And many people have died as a result. I don't just mean physical death. That has also happened. Religious persecution in the name of faith. A holy war is one of the worst type of wars. Because it's not just you and I, it's what God wants. Crusades were led. Holy wars were fought. Millions killed in the name of a belief. That means not just there was a different opinion. Could not tolerate yours because you're a heretic. It's heresy. It's against God. You need to be erased, annihilated from this earth. I'm not going to compare hate ideologies, but it's an intolerant one. So you have that element in human beings that need to feel I am absolutely of a monopoly over the truth, and the other is the enemy. Is it logical? If you sit back and start thinking, 1 second, that person has a heart that beats, a soul, family. Why are they being completely invalidated to the point of killing them? And as I said, killing isn't just physical, it could also be emotional, psychological, rejected, blacklisted, excommunicated because of positions that I have. First of all, how do I know that my position is 100% right, as I mentioned earlier? Number two, even if I think it's 100% right, what right do I have to take away somebody else's choice to live? Was I given that authority? So here again you see the rationality. Even if you're convinced that your position is 100% correct, the rationality of invalidating to the point of annihilating another position. And I want to go make it a little more subtle. I don't just mean a holy war with blood. Annihilating could also be, as I said, dismissing, judging, invalidating, undermining, excommunicating, rejecting. And you see this even in school. The bullying is a form of this, where a child is picked upon, whatever the reason. They may even be, some people are more vulnerable, and they're picked upon, and they're bullied, and they can be hurt and traumatized in a very serious way. This is a more microcosmic form, but it's the same idea. Where's the respect for the other? Even if you have a good reason and say this person is whatever reason. So you disagree with their approach. The personalizing. That is what we're trying to understand and exploring, because that's the only place you can come and correct it if you understand why is that the case. So I believe I've already said 3 different elements, maybe 2 or 3. The first was the media hype and the ease for us to just be easily susceptible and impressionable. Second is something about people wanting to feel they're part of a group and feeling that our group is the right one, especially when you start invoking religious authority and God and absolute terms. The third, I would say, is much more deeply psychological, and that is a fundamental insecurity that people have. When a person is very secure about their position, they don't have to, they can coexist and they can listen to others. The concept of being open-minded. So in Hasidic thought, there's a word called das. Moichen de gadlus. Using some Hebrew, Kabbalistic Hasidic terms. It means a mature mind. And a mature mind doesn't just mean chronologically that you're not 5 years old, you're 25 years old, or 35 or 45. A mature mind, and it says about das, especially das, discernment. The ability to not just tolerate, but contain different opinions. Here's an opinion, here's another opinion, even contradictory ones. That comes from a fundamental sense of security within, where you're secure with your own barometer and navigational tools, that you can listen to many different opinions and remain detached until you come to some determination. And even then, you could say that opinion was a good opinion, had certain merit, but I chose this opinion, or, as I mentioned, something that comes out of a few different opinions. And one of the morning prayers is an interesting expression. It says there are 2 verses that contradict each other, and a third verse comes and reconciles between them. And the word reconcile is an interesting word. Reconcile doesn't just mean each one gets compromised, like finding some type of compromising solution, like a mediator would compromise. So you don't get everything, I don't get everything, and we come to terms. That reconcile is more than compromise. Reconcile is finding a deeper truth that each verse contributed, and then you come away with a third, bigger, better perspective. Now anyone who's ever been in a brainstorm session, anyone who's ever been in a corporate boardroom, or in an innovative lab of ideas, knows that the healthiest and most powerful way to get an idea clear and crystallized is to hear different opinions, to invite them, not just to accept them and tolerate them, to invite them. To invite them means I present an idea and then say, okay, now let's be brutal about it. I remember hearing that word when my book, Toward a Meaningful Life, was being prepared for publication. The editor-in-chief, the publisher said, be brutal, meaning read it brutally, because if you want excellence, you need to rip it apart. And I love that concept. And there was nothing personal about it. But you have to be secure to be able to deal with that, because nobody likes critique. Nobody likes to be taken apart. But you show me excellence, you'll see it came with a price. And the price is, yes, constantly trying to improve and seeing the little flaws. Not to look for flaws, but to be looking for deeper truth. So you hear different opinions. As a matter of fact, in counseling people about different choices, I say it's always a healthy thing is to have a thought, an idea, and then you yourself, let alone getting others, but you yourself should stretch the idea by saying, and what if I did the exact opposite? And people will say, 1 second. I remember sitting in my office with sometimes a new employee or a new advisor or consultant, and I would come up with an idea, and then I myself would start challenging and say, this idea, I don't know if this idea works. Let's do something opposite. They say, but you gave the idea. I said, but that's the healthy process. Stretch it in every possible direction, just like a scientific experiment. You can't just experiment with it in a certain temperature. You have to put it under hot extremes or cold extremes in different environments because you want to make sure that it's a true theory. And the only way to do that is by challenging it. It's actually the Talmudic method. Clarity is achieved by stretching an idea in so many different directions, opposite ones, even extreme opposites, and then saying, okay, now that we've listened to all the different perspectives. And it's hard to do yourself. That's why it's important to also have others, because they have different ways of looking at it. And you come away with, you know what you come away with? A much better product, a much better theory, a much better idea. So not only should it be tolerated, it should be welcomed. Because it actually creates a deeper synergy, a deeper appreciation. In addition to the fact that you can afterwards say, you know what? We were thorough. We looked through all options. We weren't sloppy. We didn't just say, oh, this sounds like a great idea. We moved ahead. We thought it through. We thought of the implications. We thought of the different ways it would be taken, the different ways people would look at it. Now, you could still make mistakes, but that's the process. So why shouldn't that be the same with political issues, policy issues, dealing with racism, dealing with government? I'm not suggesting that today is worse than ever. You know, whenever you're living through something, you always think is the worst. You read history, you read there were real battles, even duels, and even wars fought due to different opinions. I'm not suggesting this is it. But when you're living through it, we do have to deal with what the reality on the ground. We deal with our children. And they look at this. And what are they learning? That for me to have a disagreement with someone means I have to invalidate them. I have to even reject them. It's so anti-intellectual thinking, open-minded inquiry. And I'm not suggesting remaining ambiguous and you know what, I tolerate all opinions because I don't have a position, period. I'm a observer, a bystander. That's not what I'm suggesting. It's very good to have strong opinions. But it's also very good to make sure that you listen to other strong opinions. I can't tell you how many times people have challenged me about different ideas. And sometimes you see that the person who's challenging you is not really open to hearing another position. They want to justify their position. They dress it up in nice intellectual arguments. And then you ask them, I said, so are you open to hearing another perspective and coming away with a different conclusion than you already had? Or is it a foregone, predetermined conclusion? So no intelligent person likes to hear that. They say, I've always heard, and what about you? Are you that way? I said, let's try it out. The point is not even what conclusion to come to. Can we even hear each other? And I've seen people who just simply continuously give me the same argument. When they hear I'm not agreeing or I disagree, they'll say, okay, let me rephrase it, as if I didn't get what they said. If you really heard what I said, you would agree with me. I said, I heard what you said, and maybe I disagree with you. There's nothing wrong with that. We're still friends. Why do I need to be wrong for you to be right? So this brings me to the insecurity of who we are. And perhaps that explains point number 2 and number 1, why we tend to go with a group type of herd mentality, whether it's a religious group or other type of group, and why we're so susceptible to the media and others telling us what to do, because we don't have strong position ourselves. So then we get locked into another position. We haven't thought it through. We're not tolerating another perspective because we've convinced this is right. And there you go. It's become a personal attack now. And when you exponentially grow this and magnify it, you have what you have. It's not just 2 people. 2 people, you could say, okay, we'll sit down. But now I have a whole group that agrees with me. How often do people say to you, when in the middle of a disagreement or a discussion, they'll say, what do you mean everybody thinks like I do? What are you talking? There's something the matter with you. What's this everybody? It's their group. I said, but it's only your group. There's other groups that think otherwise. Okay, those guys are idiots, or those guys are political, or those guys have some agenda, some interest. I said, well, maybe this group also does. No. it gets down to a point that you suddenly defend yourself not by the merit of the argument, by the merit that the fact that there are others that feel that way. This is all the language of insecurity. And again, I'm not trying to accuse anyone of this, but trying to analyze the roots of why disagreement turns into hate. Or at least rejection, if not total hate. Because it doesn't make sense any other way. Now let me go back to what I said earlier about emotional passions. Why can't we just say it's an emotional passion, I'm passionate about it, and I really believe this is the right way, and the other way is wrong? So, as I said earlier, why cannot that be stated as such? Yeah, but the wrong is so wrong that you're actually doing something criminal. You know, you have this, let's say in religious context, someone doing something that is betraying or defying the laws of the religious system. Or let's talk about it emotionally. There's, in marriage, one person betrays the other, infidelity. So what are we going to say? The spouse is going to say, okay, let me hear the other person's position, let's be dispassionate about it. No, you did something wrong. You did a crime. So I go back. Of course there are real crimes. I'm not suggesting there aren't things that are really bad and they need to be addressed. But let's talk a moment about that. If a marriage falls apart because of it, and it's definitely going to be challenged because of a betrayal, or any other violation, abuse, and other forms that we can determine are true problems, not hearsay, then as a counselor, as a coach, I can tell you, the challenge then is, can we understand what caused this? This doesn't justify it, but you want to know what caused it, because if you want to work on this marriage, and you always ask the couple, are you ready? You want to work, you want to dig deeper, you want to find, and many times they'll say, yes, if I know I can trust my partner again. And the only way to do that is that the partner, the spouse, acknowledges and perhaps even digs deeper and says where it came from. Not to justify, but to understand, because then you can say, okay, if that's where it came from, a boredom, a distraction, maybe challenges in the marriage that led to it, not as an excuse, so then you try to address those root issues to be able to make the marriage a better marriage. That's why the personalization does not help. So I'm going a little more subtle now. This doesn't mean that you accept the other person's crime. But this is different than what I was speaking about. Most of what the disagreements now in the landscape of our lives is not on that level. Even though people say that. They'll say that about President Trump, that he's an abuser, he's a betrayer, he's treasonous, all the other words used. But I don't know, first of all, if you can't establish it, then maybe he's being driven by an emotional position. And the same thing the other way around. People who hate the liberals or hate the Democrats or other beliefs that they don't accept. Is it based on intelligent and sweeping invalidation of an entire group? You can say, I don't agree with these positions. The personalization is the issue. And even if you could identify objectively that there is a crime involved, so then there's a method to deal with that as well. There's a method of justice. There's a civil way to deal with that as well. Now, obviously, once it spills over to real criminal, a person is dangerous to others, then we go back to what I mentioned before about the Nazis, even though that's a much larger scale, but even on an individual scale, it's another story. A person's been established by their peers objectively. That's why you have a judge and jury for these reasons, not a lynch mob in the street. Then yes, there is recourse of how, whatever system of law, let's say in the United States, of what you do. What is the due process of punishment or deterrence and other actions that help correct, or especially protect innocent people from someone that's not innocent. But to say, for example, talk about the police, that all the police in this country are all accused of murder because of the murder of George Floyd. That would be like saying, because a black man killed a white or killed another black, all blacks are murderers. God forbid. That is part of this whole discussion here. It's a personalization, not on an individual scale. It's essentially guilty by association, a whole group. That's called racism. That's called discrimination. I can speak for the Jewish people. This is what we've been at the brunt of for thousands of years. Even if you had one issue with a person who's Jewish, in business or otherwise, that means that all Jews are corrupt, that all Jews are that way. But that became the stereotype, a convenient stereotype. Christ killers, or the different terms. But again, I don't want to go into individual cases here, just to demonstrate that if anyone knows about this, I can say I know about it, and especially as a Jewish person. So I'm quite familiar what it means to hate someone just because of their religion or faith, or looks, or color of the skin, or whatever it may be. But I'm discussing here more than just discrimination and racism. I'm discussing even two people coming from the same, two Anglo-Saxons, if you wish, or two Jews, or two non-Jews, or two blacks, or two whites, and still disagree in a way that becomes, yes, rejection, invalidation, and even hatred. So we've listed a bunch of reasons. And I know that's not the ultimate goal of this class, this discussion. It's not just to list the reasons, but there's a reason you need to list the reasons. And that is because you want to understand the root of the issue. And the root of the issue is something about each one of us. If you're a person that cannot hear another opinion, you can find all kinds of justifications. But there's something you have to look at inside yourself, not inside the other. It's not about correcting it, that if everybody agreed with me, the problem would be solved, which is what it almost sounds like. Like if everyone agreed with my position, no more issues. No, everybody not only is entitled, but actually we invite and welcome. Everybody's position is different because of different reasons. Now, some people could be wrong. People could be wrong. As I said, we can be brainwashed. We can be programmed. We can be convinced of something due to, as I said, parental influence, social influence, media influence, whatever it is that influences us. But even if you meet a person who's been influenced like that, they're still a human being with a soul. So if you're a person that's enlightened and you feel you're right and that person's wrong, there's a way of dealing with it. If we see ourselves as one larger entity, and it's your own brother or sister who you feel is wrong, what would you do if it's coming out of love? Would you argue and argue and argue to the point of exhaustion? You'd find ways. You have to be intelligent. And this is not a condescending approach. This is understanding and respecting another. That requires a whole makeover, literally a transformation of attitudes. I wish I could say that the media is not part of the problem. This is what media should be doing. Instead of promoting one position and invalidating another, media, open-minded journalists and writers and thinkers, the thought leaders, what makes them thought leaders is they should say, we're not going to be subjective here. We're going to create a platform where people can truly disagree in an environment without invalidation. I have not seen that. Everyone claims that they allow the other voice and we give equal time. Baloney. It's their political positions. You do it enough to seem credible. But it's not honest, and it's disingenuous, it's not honest, it's not sincere. You can tell. So really what we're talking about here is a fundamental respect of each other. If I can disrespect you because I don't agree with you, it means I don't respect your being, not just your position. And I have to qualify again. I'm not talking about a criminal. Even a criminal, we still don't invalidate the person. We just say your behavior is so atrocious and you're a danger to society and to others, so we need to do something about that. But beyond that, opinions that are not about criminal behavior, to make a statement that my position is the only one that's going to bring justice, that's going to bring equality, when really, in fact, it's really a fight for control and power, is itself part of the problem. So the real fundamental respect for each other. And this brings me to the root of the issue. Long before we had positions, we were born to a mother and father with a soul that comes from a higher place. You ever think about that? What's your soul's position? You think a soul cares whether the Boston Red Sox or the Yankees win a game or a World Series? Do you think a soul really cares about Republicans and Democrats? A soul has much higher purpose. Its main primary concern is, am I fulfilling the purpose of my life? And am I interacting with others so together we can collaborate in fulfilling that purpose? And what is that purpose? To transform this world and make it a divine home, a more spiritual, a more refined environment, instead of a materialistic one, instead of a selfish one, instead of a place of divisiveness, a place of diversity and harmony within diversity. So let us go back to this concept. So in the Kabbalistic model, you have two models. You have the model of chaos. It's called toihu, where there's the shattering of the containers. You may be familiar with the concept. And you have tikkun, a word that's pretty popular today. Tikkun, repair. But what are you repairing? You're repairing fragments. Diversity is a beautiful thing. That's how we've been created. No two faces are alike. No two opinions should be alike. We could agree, but every person has their personality, their temperament, their disposition, different complexion. And that's healthy. That's beauty. That's what creates beauty, the diversity of life. It's not one cell. It's not one musical note. It's not one color. It's a multifaceted tapestry, but working in harmony. Diversity has another side. Diversity misunderstood or not appreciated properly can end up being chaos, can end up being divisiveness. So diversity can move to divisiveness, which is divergence, or it could move toward harmony, which is convergence. And these are two models in life. The reason we have diversity is for that beautiful harmony that is created only through the synergy of the many. E pluribus unum, from the many one, but from many, not from one. And not all the many become one, they're driven by one cause, like one symphony, with thousands of different instruments and many lines of music and so on, but led to war toward one cause. If we have that cause in mind, and we understand that's our soul's purpose, that's the driving force, your driving passion, not to be right and the other person to be wrong. That's already mechanics. But to live up to that, then you want to hear from others. Not only do you tolerate another opinion, because in the first model, the chaotic model of divergence to the point of even fragmentation, why do the containers get shattered is the word used in the Kabbalistic literature, is because not only is there no tolerance, well, two things. First of all, there's no tolerance for one another. Everyone just in their position, and that's it. Inability to listen, inability to allow another space. But more importantly, additionally, also not appreciating that the other can make you greater and richer in intelligence and in your experiences. So those are the two main problems. In the tikkun model, the repair model, it's not just your repair. It's not just two forces, okay, we'll tolerate each other, we'll coexist. They actually become completely interconnected. Like a human body. How many different systems are there in the body? How many different organs and limbs? How many different cells? Trillions. 30 to 75 trillion cells. The same thing in the larger universe. When it's working in harmony, it doesn't compromise. It's not saying, oh, we're eliminating the individuality of each component. It's the harmony within diversity. And when it's not harmony, it's chaos, it's divisiveness, to the point of war and hatred. The pieces, the parts don't tolerate each other and definitely don't appreciate how each one complements the other. So let's apply that now to human beings. The human beings, different than a musical composition or a work of art or nature or our very bodies, we have free choice. Musical notes don't have free choice. You play them the right order, it's harmonious. But imagine the musical notes all have their own little lives and they have their own agendas. And they go off doing whatever they want to do. They forget the higher purpose. They forget the soul's purpose, the soul of why you were here in the first place. So what do you think is going to lead to? My own interest, my own agenda, which frankly, because you're not really living up to your divine mission your mission statement. So there's an element of insecurity because you're not really sure of where you should be, even though you may convince yourself. So what do you think that insecurity is going to lead to? A other person being a threat to you. Not being able to tolerate them. Not being able to coexist and definitely not cooperate with them. And then add the media into the equation. I'm sorry, let's start from the earlier. And then add our parents and society and political agendas and people spinning stories as they see fit and others who want power and control using us and trying to manipulate us and the media all part of the circus or worse. Then what do you think you have left? You don't have your navigation. You don't have your GPS, so to speak, of your soul's mission. So you're lost at sea, completely receptive and susceptible and impressionable by other people's opinion. So of course what's going to happen is you'll embrace an opinion and to the point that it can become completely so extreme that you just don't tolerate anyone else and you consider yourself tolerant. That's also part of the ideology. So what we have here is that is the essence of what we're discussing here. Now, I know this sounds theoretical on a root level. What we're talking practical. Look, people are fighting and people can't get along. But I have to go back to because to me, you're not going to solve it with Band-Aids. Yes, can you get people in a room and have them debate and put on another show? We're going to see that coming in this election season. And we're going to see other different things. But the polarization is so deep that whatever grandstanding there'll be, whatever type of seemingly we're discussing will be, it's grandstanding. You see it. Everyone's got their agenda. That's why it's so easy to become cynical in this climate without even having a position. You don't even know. I mean, everybody, who can you trust? Everybody's got their position, intolerant of the other. And everyone claiming we're the most tolerant of all. So the point I'm making in all of this, obviously, is that we need to go back to the root. If I was speaking to every individual on earth, and hopefully this technology allows us that, I would say, I don't want to talk about your political positions. I don't care who you love or you hate. I want to talk about you, your soul, your calling, your deeper purpose. Let's get that in place. Is anyone stopping you from finding your calling? Is there anyone that's disagreeing with you, not allowing you to? So why are you getting caught up in all these? First, find yourself. So when we talk to, for example, children, you want to start talking to them about politics, about power, about fighting for control? No, you want to talk to them about themselves. So all of us have to go back to that inner spirit, the inner child, if you wish. And I'm not trying to be naive. I'm not trying. I'm not being naive. I'm talking about finding that deeper sense of yourself that you can say, okay, you know what? I know what I stand for. And then once you're armed with that, then you can say, let me have now a discussion with somebody. You may find like-minded people. You may find people that don't agree with you. But you know, you have a position. You know what you stand for. I always like to quote the Kotzker Rebbe. It's about relationships. You could apply it here as well. Where he said, if I am I, because you are you, and you are you because I am not and you are not. But if I am I because I am I, and you are you because you are you, I am and you are. Beyond the poetic element, simply put, if your identity is defined by the proximity to another, in other words, you only know a position. You tell me your position, then I'll tell you my position, because I don't have a position. In other words, you never really established your own sense of self, a position coming from within, and is defined by others, and their position is also defined by others. The blind leading the blind, what do you think is going to happen? You will not be, and the other person will not be. However, if you find yourself, I am I because I am I. I've discovered my calling. And now you're looking for ways to implement it. And the other person does the same, then you will be and the other person will be, and you'll be able to coexist and, more importantly, complement each other. So this is not just the key to disagreeing without hate. It's also the key to true love and to true relationships. Can we reclaim this calling of ours, this approach? I'm a firm believer, absolutely. And maybe sometimes things have to hit rock bottom. I don't know if it's rock bottom, But we have to see sometimes the converse, how things are not working, to wake us up. My objective here is just to put it out there. I firmly believe, and I note this for myself, and I hope you feel the same. We can be agents of change. We can be part of the solution, not part of the problem. That's a good place to begin. Don't allow yourself to get caught up in an argument that either leads nowhere or just leads even worse to complete cutoff and hatred or rejection or ignoring, you're not for me. And it all begins with ourselves, your attitude and how you talk to the people you know. And sometimes you'll find someone that agrees with you. Even there I would challenge it and say, let's discuss this. Maybe we should look at another position. And you'll find people who disagree. If it's someone that's so disagreeable that there's nothing to talk about, I would not engage. I would not get into a whole. It'll just intensify, exacerbate the whole issue. Try to be kind and nice. Say something. Maybe find some area where you can say, maybe give this some thought. I'll think about what you said. But we have to choose our battles. And I have no doubt that if we see ourselves as proactive in initiating and looking at ourselves and others in that sacred way, you are a sacred soul, created in the divine image. And yes, you matter. Your opinion also matters. But opinions are opinions. And opinions can be challenged. My opinion can be challenged, so can yours, without invalidating the divine image, the soul you have. No, there's no invalidation, period. Even if I totally disagree, I still respect you and the God-given soul that you have. And because of that, let's work it out. Because you're not a sum of your opinions. You have a soul before you had opinions. And so did I. And as such, let's discover that commonality, that we're all here part of one larger organism, whether we feel it or not, even those that absolutely disagree. That's the tragedy, that the Nazis and the Germans were also put on earth. They made a terrible choice. They're also part of a greater purpose, but they didn't live up to it. And same thing individually, people do not live up to it and create great damage. But that's how we have to see the universe and people, that we're all part of a greater whole. And barring, as I said, criminal or really horrible activity and actions, even there you don't invalidate the soul, you invalidate the behavior, and you make sure that person cannot be a danger to others. But at the end of the day, in most situations, especially today, we are all part of one bigger picture. Can we convey that? Can we embrace that? Can we live life from inside out? And the opinions and the disagreements should be a reflection of who we are, instead of those disagreements defining who we are, which of course defines us often in very adversarial ways. I have no doubt we can do it. This has been Simon Jacobson, Meaningful Life Center. This is our mission, meaningful life, to find meaning in life, your meaning, my meaning, and how we all complement each other. So please join me and partner with me in this, hopefully, revolution. Let's create a revolution in thinking, in behaving, in feeling, in how we look at each other, and how we use disagreements in a healthy way to create a better, cleaner, more crystallized, healthier approach to life. Harmony within diversity. Go to meaningfullife.com. You could share and like, and let's all join together. And it's always an honor to say a few words to you. I'd love to hear your feedback and suggestions and thoughts, including your disagreement. Please. Every Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time now. But these programs are archived. You can download them as MP3s, podcasts, and so on, as well as many other programs. Just check out our calendar at meaningfullife.com. We have a whole array of programming, especially dealing with the challenges of our unique times. Everyone be well, and I look forward to see you soon.
This program is brought to you by the Meaningful Life Center. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at meaningfullife.com/donate.